So your Carismo Design Huracan steering wheel has arrived. You don't want to take it to a shop, you don't want to take it to a dealership, you want to try it yourself. Use this video for a couple of hints and tricks that we recommend you know before you attempt to install yourself. Okay, so we've turned the steering wheel 90 degrees and this now reveals the clipping point for the airbag where the hinge holds the airbag. There's two hinges, one on this side and then when you turn it another 180 degrees on the other side. We are going to use a flathead screwdriver to release the hinge. The hinge is actually at the top of this opening, and you want to put the screwdriver in there and depress the hinge downward. So what you'll see is that obviously not having visibility makes it very difficult. What I use, or what I like to use when doing this install, is I like to take my phone and put it in the dash with a selfie camera on, and this way you're actually seeing exactly what's going on in that hole as you're moving the screwdriver around to get the clip and be able to properly push it down. See, I'm pushing it down now. When I push this clip down, what that'll enable me to do is pull the airbag on this side out. You might notice that even when you push the clip and the release clip here down, the airbag is still in there pretty tight, so you might have to really pull pretty hard at it to get it to release, even having pushed down the clip. So now that we've unlatched the two latches that hold the airbag and we're ready to disconnect the connector pins on the back of it, we're going to walk around to our front. Here in our front area we have the battery compartment. So the battery compartment, we turn these two plastic screws holding this little panel in. The panel comes right out. Here you have access to your battery. Now on the Huracan, access to the negative terminal, which would be the terminal you normally want to disconnect, is pretty limited, and for this reason we're just going to actually disconnect the positive terminal. And if you want to, you can pump the brake a couple of times to make sure there's no residual currents left in the system, you know, make sure your brake lights are not coming on and so forth. And after that, you can be sure that there's no more electricity running in the car. And at that point, you want to proceed with disconnecting your airbag. So we've unhinged the two hinges on the airbag that were holding it in. Now we see that there's a connector here holding it. That's the first thing we're going to pull out. We're going to pull at the green pin at the top to unclip the pin first. Now what we're going to do to completely remove it is pull more on the pin and press down, and you'll see it'll pop right off. Here's this clip. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the connector here on the bottom that's sitting right here. All you're going to do is you're going to pull. There's obviously a release clip, but they're very small and sometimes break easily. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to get this released and pull it apart. I'm just doing it with a little bit of brute force. Clip comes out, the two clips are disconnected, your airbag is fully disconnected from the car. Okay, so we removed the airbag, we put that aside. Now all that remains is to remove the steering wheel. We have to unscrew the center nut of the steering wheel that's holding it tight. Remember, it's an M12 bit. Now, you don't want to take it out completely yet, the center nut. You want to just unscrew it the majority of the way, and if you've unscrewed it completely, just give it a couple of spins in so that it stays there. What we're going to do, and why we're doing this, is we're going to pull the steering wheel to ourselves so as to free it and loosen it off of the column that it's sitting on. You may have to pull pretty hard. Here we go, steering wheel comes off. I know now that once I take this nut out, I can gently remove the steering wheel without having to tug at it like crazy. There we go. And now your steering wheel is free, and we can transfer the trim over to your new Carismo steering wheel. Removed after you've unscrewed the 3 and 4 T9 Torx bolts out of the sides and the bottom piece. The sides just come right out. You should be able to lift them out if they're fully unscrewed. The bottom leg, where you unscrewed 4 of them, you'll notice that there's still some resistance to pull it out even after you've done that. The reason for that is the bottom leg here, it's actually attached to this back piece, so you need to remove them together. To do that, you need to wedge a plastic removal tool in the middle here. Just be careful not to scuff it up too much. when you're attempting to do that. When you're doing this, you're unclipping the little clips that are holding it on the back side. And as soon as you do that, this will lift right up together with it. You will find underneath a T20 Torx bolt. This T20 Torx bolt is actually holding the buttons on the face of the steering wheel. So just a T20 to remove it, unscrew that, take it out, and you're done on the back side. We can flip the wheel over and continue removing the face portion of the trim. Removing the center trim, we have to remove it as a single piece, although it does consist of a couple of items. It just comes out together. There are a few pins like these here on the bottom that sit in the very tight rubber piece housing portion of the wheel, and this is what holds the trim primarily inside of the steering wheel housing. So this rubber is not very malleable, and these trims are plastic. I mean, the pins on the trim are plastic. So your biggest concern here is really breaking either the entirety of the trim by trying to brute force it, or breaking one of the pins. So with this, you have to take your time. The pins that are located underneath that you don't see are one each up here along the top where you see the little gap. One here, one here. There's the two pins that you can clearly see here. So we're gonna pull that out. We're gonna use a little pry tool to get it out on this side and out on this side. But most importantly, getting these two out should be done relatively simultaneously, because there's a high chance of breaking the plastic right here in the middle. It's not too sturdy. And it is pretty fragile if you're pulling just on this side, rip it out with full force, and this side is still well attached. You'll actually just end up snapping the trim piece. So I've put this trim lifting tool underneath the edge of it, pulled out the top portion of the trim, and what you'll see is here are the two pins. Right here are the two pins that are sitting in there holding it, and they're just, you know, wedged into the rubber. They're plastic and the rubber is thick, and that's the only thing really holding them. It's not a bolt, so you do have to force your way to get it out. Now remember, as you're bending this plastic trim, it's obviously still attached on the bottom here, so there's a risk of breaking. So you need to be evenly removing all portions of it and wedging it out here a little bit, here a little bit, at the top a little bit, and then eventually the entire thing comes out as a single piece. Okay, so I've just wedged the trim piece out of the housing. Comes out as a single piece. You see all the buttons are still on it, and here's the rubber, the thick and malleable rubber within which a lot of these pins sit. Now if you look at the trim, I'll flip it over for you. This will give you a better idea of what pins are actually holding it in the rubber. There's two pins along the top right here. These are the two pins along the top, and they're positioned right here. Then there's also two pins along the bottom. These are the obvious ones. You see them when you're looking into the steering wheel. Furthermore, there's two more pins right here and right here, and they are your button pieces. Each has its own little leg sticking out, and that goes right into the rubber as well. So these are the button areas. Okay, so your Carismo design steering wheel's here. You took it out of the box, you prepped it, you've got your trim from your original steering wheel. We simply replaced that just the way we took it off. You make sure that the pins obviously align just like they did on your OEM wheel, and squeeze it in, make sure everything sits nice and tight. When putting this in, small piece of advice here is on these tabs, you'll see they're sharp, thin guide pins. Make sure that this guide pin aligns nicely with the cut right here in the rubber, so that this doesn't bulge out and not sit as flush as you would like it to sit. If you already put it on and you realize that now that's misaligned, there's no need to rip out the trim piece completely. What you can do is you can just take a flathead screwdriver and try to bend it in and out a little bit, so that that pin that didn't seat itself properly the first time goes into the gap. Okay, so here's your wheel, all assembled, ready to go. Now we're just gonna install it on the car. So, just as you remember, your steering column, take the wheel, put it right back on. It'll be nice and tight. Cool, it's sitting well. We take the nut that we uninstalled originally, the M12 if you remember, Put that on. Just tighten it a little bit. Have a go at it with your tools. You want to make sure you tighten it pretty damn well. Don't over tighten it. Always tighten to OEM spec. In terms of OEM spec, always reference original Lamborghini manuals. Here we go. All set. So the next step would be for us to connect up the airbag, and after that we're ready to go. Okie doke. So the wheel's installed. We've tightened the nut. All that remains is the two connectors and to put the airbag back in. So again, just like when we were disconnecting it, don't touch any of the pins on the airbag. You don't need to do that. No need to disconnect these or the ground or anything like that. There's only two connectors that we disconnected, and therefore there's only two connectors you should be connecting. Now, the bottom connector adheres first. Snap those two back in together. Make sure that you seat it over there where it's supposed to sit so that it doesn't interfere with any motion of the airbag or rotation of the steering wheel. Put this in. Now we want to make sure we connect the yellow pin. As you remember, you pulled out the green clip on the yellow pin, and then you pushed down and pulled more on the green clip to pull it out. In a similar fashion, this is how we were going to connect it up. Bring it back together, push it in, push in the clip, and you're done. So, last step, you just pop the airbag in, just like when you initially took it out. All the pins are connected, you place it back in its original position and press it. You can double check by pulling on the corners to make sure it's not coming out and it's actually fully in, and you're done. Your steering wheel's install is all complete. Now all that remains is to reconnect the battery and go take it for a spin.